This is Andre Nouwen, who, Catholic mystic, teacher, writer. He says, over the years, I've come to realize that the greatest trap in our life is not success, popularity, or power, but self-rejection. He says, as soon as someone accuses me or criticizes me, as soon as I'm rejected, left alone, or abandoned, I find myself thinking, well, that proves it once again. I'm no good. I deserve to be pushed aside, forgotten, rejected. Self-rejection is the greatest enemy of the spiritual life because it contradicts the sacred voice that calls us the beloved. Being the beloved constitutes the core truth of our existence. I'm just going to read the last lines again. Self-rejection is the greatest enemy of the spiritual life because it contradicts the sacred voice that calls us the beloved. Being the beloved constitutes the core truth of our existence. So let's look together now at the movement from that stuck place where I identified in the cloud of, I'm bad, I'm failing, something's wrong, and how we move and wake up back to sensing that sun, that light and warmth, which really is always here, but so often inaccessible, or feels that way. And the movement toward making love of ourselves perfect, towards being that beloved, is that we recognize and release the second arrow, that sense of, that criticism, that judgment, that voice that's saying something's wrong with me, that we recognize that and wake up out of that. And here's the main thing, that we come right into an embodied experience of the moment. It takes both of those things, recognizing the second arrow, okay, I'm down on myself again, opening up beyond that, sensing there's more to this world than that, and coming fully into embodied presence. What sustains the trance is not seeing that we're caught up in that cloud of personal badness and being dissociated from our body. As long as we're dissociated, we can't heal. So let me give you, first of all, a simple example of that shifting from being lost inside that cloud of not okayness back to something more open. With just an example from this morning, for me, it was a drizzly morning, and I go out walking usually around 6:30, and I wake up and the first thing I do is go for a very long walk, and I meditate, usually outside if it's not too rainy. And this morning I started moving, and I have a hill that I have to go up right at the beginning, and my mind went into total complaining, grumpiness, a lot of physical discomfort, my hip, my shoulder, I felt a little bit of queasy, it kept going, kept lasting, and then I started having thoughts about, I'm in a demanding stretch of time, so feeling anxious about getting things done, so I was aversive to how my body was feeling, and I'm feeling anxiety and not liking the anxiety. And then I even stopped walking because I realized, oh, I'm not liking myself right now. Because it wasn't only that I was feeling physical discomfort and anxiety, I wasn't liking the self that was feeling so aversive. Now that added piece is the hook that can create our mood and stuckness and repeating of patterns for decades. So I paused. That was the moment of pausing, and I just recognized, okay, this is a judgment about self, and I started coming back into my body. I said, okay, it's okay to feel anxious. It's like this weather system, it's okay to feel it. And it's okay to feel the sensations in my body, and it's okay to feel aversion. In other words, it's okay to feel what I'm feeling. And in the moments of recognizing that second arrow and then coming back and just making it okay what was going on, that's when there was a sense of a more expanding open. That's when I wasn't any longer inside that small grumpy cloud of not okayness. I was back into a quality of presence that I still didn't feel comfortable, but there was no hook that there was something wrong with me. In the moment that you become mindful and aware of the second arrow, you're no longer hooked by it. There still is going to be some experience of it, but if you're really aware of it and you come into a full embodied presence, it's no longer such a hook, because your awareness, is larger than that cloud. Keep going. The bottom line core teaching is that whatever is not an awareness controls us. Okay? So if you're assuming that something's wrong with you and that's in the background and you're not aware of it, it will keep your whole system contracted. So how do we loosen that second arrow? For me this morning it wasn't really hard because I've been working with the second arrow since I was 20, and it's very familiar, and this is what I've spent lots and lots of moments going, oh, this again, okay? But there are times that second arrow has a really deep hook. And for many of us, the core beliefs really, it doesn't feel like a belief, it feels like truth. It's our body saying, something is wrong with me. So I want to spend the last part of this exploration on how do we begin to loosen that hook? Because I feel like that's the key element for so many of us for coming into a really true sense of freedom. And there's two major strategies I want to explore or mention on how we loosen it. So if you are caught in the sense of something's fundamentally wrong with me, I do not have the capacity to be intimate with others. If people really got to know me, they wouldn't like me. If we have some fundamental sense of no matter what happens, I'm going to fail, there's some different ways we can start saying, okay, that's the belief. How do I wake up from believing it so much? And one way is, I think of it as kind of going for the big picture. And by that I mean, we start realizing that belief and experience of ourself is conditioned not only necessarily from our childhood, but even from past generations. This is important because if you can get that what you're experiencing was set in motion generations back, you really start getting it's not your fault, you know? And that's a really big deal. Now, here, this is, we'll go to science right now. This is from December 1st, 2013 from the BBC News. There was an article about a study from Nature Neuroscience. And it showed how mice trained to avoid a smell passed their aversion on to their grandchildren. And that might not sound like a big deal, but what it's saying is that behavior can be affected by events in previous generations that are passed on through genetic memory. So the trauma somebody experiences in a war are from abuse, are from an accident. Some of the emotions and experiences around that can be passed on and passed on. So there's some deep sense of I'm endangered. It's not our fault that we have such a sense of chronic endangerment. There's been generations of genetic memory passing it on. I have worked with many people that the shift point in their healing process is when they looked at all the conditions that gave rise to the behaviors that they hated about themselves. They realized, oh, well, when I was in the womb, my mother was drinking alcohol, or my mother was experiencing the rage of my father, or after I was born, my parents split, and there was the kind of depression that there was nothing at all coming my way. So of course I'm grabbing. You know, in other words, when we start seeing how everything we dislike has a cause, really has a cause. I often call this, I refer to that metaphor with the dog with the leg in a trap, that in some way our legs in a trap, we're just acting exactly how any human being with a nervous system would act due to certain causes and conditions. It's in those moments something in us gets, and it's not just intellectual, wow, it's really not my fault. And I've seen that realization does not make us irresponsible, it does the opposite. It's like in that moment of realizing it's something loose, and so we actually can respond to our circumstances from a lot more intelligence and compassion. There was one man who's come to, who I've known for years, different conferences and so on, an author, somewhat well known, who we got to know each other and shared some, and he's very, very ambitious. And some of the things he shared is some that he feels most vulnerable about is how competitive he is with other authors and people in his field, and how much he really wants to be the star, and how much in searching for that and trying to get that, he inflates himself and does some pretending and also does some gossiping and putting other people down, things he's really embarrassed about. So he was sharing that because we've shared what's real some. And that the shift for him, because he's got a meditation practice, was that when he saw that behavior that really, in a sense, disgusted him, that just felt so small-minded, he went under it and he said, okay, what's really driving it? And he got to the place that he realized it was coming from, he wanted to be the best and the most popular and so on, because he wanted to be loved. And he could see when he looked at his childhood, very, in this case, father was very, again, well-known, very narcissistic. He got very rewarded when he performed well and kind of ignored when he didn't. And really had this unmet need to have a feeling that he'd be loved for who he was. So he got hooked on trying to be loved for something, for being an icon of some sort. But when he could see the suffering and the yearning in the mixed, he could say, it's not my fault. It's not my, this is happening. And then that ended up creating more space, more like opening out of the cloud. He had more sense of, his heart was a little bit softer towards himself. And it actually shifted the behaviors. It's not my fault is an incredibly powerful tool if you find you're completely turned on yourself. But it doesn't end there, there's more. But that's just one way to start loosening it. Now there's another way that has to do with sensing the belief that's there and sensing how real it is to you, but in some way getting that it doesn't mean it's true. And I'd say that the main thing people get when they leave a retreat, especially the first retreat, in some way, and I've had so many tell me this, it's saying, I realize I don't have to believe my thoughts. So I'd like to give you an example of how I loosened up a core belief with this sense that this phrase, real but not true, which I got from Tsoknyi Rinpoche, a Tibetan teacher. So the background to my belief is that my parents were social activists, very politically active, involved with civil rights and poverty and economic justice and so on. And when I was younger, college and after college, I also was quite active. But then when I got into the consciousness business, so to speak, I spent a lot more time in terms of working with inner life and on that realm, and less active. And but all along felt guilty because in some way my parents were, I kind of idolized what they were doing and felt like I should be doing it all. I should be doing the inner work and also the outer work and involved with every cause and so on. So this was the kind of a background in some way, always falling short, not contributing enough. And that was for a number of years. And I remember I started working with it as in many of the ways I've been talking about. But about 5 years ago, it came up again. I realized it was latent but not gone. And it spiked because we were getting more and more involved in this community around issues of diversity, and it was such a close to my heart area. I have many good friends that have suffered directly from a lack of meaningful inclusion in the Buddha Sanghas. And it might not appear that Buddha Sanghas are not welcoming Sanghas, but a real lack of sensitivity, especially people of color. And so this was really an alive issue for me. And I remember after one particular board meeting, and we were beginning to respond, and the affinity sanghas are growing, and beginning in the board to like, and amongst the teachers to start really looking more deeply. And I remember after one board meeting, it hitting me that I'm a leader in this community and how essential it is that I commit more energy and leadership in this area. And the sense of deficiency that immediately came after that, knowing there's no way I could commit what I would think was enough. So I went home and I really felt this flooded sense of shame and falling short around something that meant so much to me, that I just wasn't enough. And so I deepened my attention. I just want to give you my process because it was a very powerful one, where I said, okay, here's the belief that I'm falling short. In some way, I'm not a good enough person because I'm not giving myself enough. And I remembered the language of real but not true. I said, okay, this feels really real. It really feels bad inside. But in some way, it's not the truth of who I am. So I wanted to keep inquiring. So I sensed, okay, how does believing this feel in my body? And when I believe that I am in some way not doing enough, there's a sense of shame, there's a kind of ache, a hollowness, a kind of pulling away from life, really getting small. So I fully allowed the sense of badness, the feeling of the felt sense in my body. And then I asked myself, well, what is it like to live with this? What's the effect this has when it's alive in me on my life? And I started sensing directly how that very guilt and shame actually created distance between me and myself and me and others. And it actually made it so it cut me off from the authentic caring. Guilt cut me off from caring. And then I asked myself, really, I felt the sense of I really want to undo this I'm bad feeling. And so I started saying, well, what would it be like without this not enough? What would it be like, and you can sense this question too for your life, what would it be like if you really weren't living with a sense of not enough? Or something's missing, something's wrong. And instantly I could feel, in this particular thing around the issue of diversity, that if I wasn't living with the not enough, I'd actually have this huge curiosity. I'd be really wanting to seek to understand how is it that this has arisen, so much sense of suffering and violence and separation and blindness. How did it happen? And I'd want to understand, and I'd have this more yearning to connect in an authentic way. But I'd feel like without the pressure of not enough, a kind of creativity and interest in the process and care, rather than a kind of dutiful and feeling crunched. The final question I asked was, who would I be if I wasn't feeling that guilt and shame? And I could immediately feel that sense of I would just be loving presence. Without that guilt and shame, without that second arrow of something's wrong, I would relax back into love. Now, I want to say that there wasn't a one shot. I have to again and again, when I feel that sense of I'm not doing enough, I have to again go, okay, it's real but not true, and feel how it feels in your body. Feel it, okay, feel it really strongly, sense the effect of that. Okay, what would it be like if I didn't believe that? Who would I be? And again, it go from being inside that cloud of a not enough, not okay person to back to that space of awareness where the sun can shine through. Read you a poem, Pesha Joyce Gertler. Finally, on my way to yes, I bump into all the places where I said no to my life, all the untended wounds, those coded messages that send me down the wrong street again and again. And I lift them one by one close to my heart, and I say, holy, holy. And I lift them one by one close to my heart, and I say, holy, holy. So tonight we're talking about undoing that conditioning to turn on ourselves. And I wanted to read this poem, Holy, Holy, because I've come to look at these times where I find myself caught in that cloud of not okay as an amazing opportunity. Because each time that I pause and really deepen attention, it becomes a gateway back to that space of loving. Each time that I really take the time to say real but not true, or it's not my fault, and I come into my body and in some way I, feel that compassion towards that pain and discomfort of self-aversion, I start melting back into loving. The key pieces are to have the intention. If you leave here or leave tonight or leave this talk with just a little more intention to make love of yourself perfect, you'll be alert for when you're caught in that cloud of self-aversion and judgment. The second step, you have to interrupt that self-talk and the judging thought, and either in some way say it's not my fault or real but not true, and come into the living feeling. Come in and go ahead and feel in your body how the aversion feels. Cry it. Let yourself cry with it. Offer yourself kindness for it. And offer forgiveness. Because the other side of presence with the places we say no is holy, holy, holy. This is Yeats. He says, I am content to follow to its source every event in action or in thought, measure the lot, forgive myself the lot. When such as I cast out remorse, so great a sweetness flows into the breast, we must laugh and we must sing, we are blessed by everything, everything we look upon is blessed. There is deep, deep freedom on the other side of that sense of not okay. And we have to pay attention. So we'll close, just take a couple of moments to do a kind of scan I like to do to loosen up the tangles. So as we close, we're exploring really this pathway to unconditional loving. We begin with the life that's right here, sensing how we can notice what's between us and loving presence. And just bring that holy, holy, that feeling it in our body, bringing tenderness, and discover the blessing on the other side, that sunlight of loving presence. So just in a simple way right now, you might scan and sense what's going on in your body, whatever sensations are here. Notice if there's places of tension or tightness. Notice if there's any places of chronic or acute unpleasantness. Letting yourself really feel your body from the inside out. Notice if there's any resistance, any aversion to what's going on in your body right now. just including in awareness the life of the body. Sense if there's anything between you and unconditional acceptance, just allowing it to be as it is. Including the felt sense in the body, emotions. If there's any anxiety or fear, sadness, or maybe you feel sleepy or numb. Whatever the state of heart-mind is right now, can you unconditionally accept this? Or is there some aversiveness, some sense of, I'm not okay because this doesn't feel okay. I shouldn't be feeling this. Something's wrong with me. Just bringing it into the light of awareness. Noticing in a broader way if there's something going on in your life that has you at war with yourself. And sensing your intention to wake up out of that cloud of self-aversion, if it's there. Sensing the possibility of noticing the beliefs that are there about yourself. And saying it's not my fault, or it's real but not true. It's not who I am. Sensing the possibility of opening with courage and great tenderness to how you're experiencing shame or self-aversion in the body. Holy, holy, offering care and forgiveness, making love of yourself perfect. From Dorothy Hunt, in this choiceless, never-ending flow of life, there's an infinite array of choices. One alone brings happiness. To love what is. Closing with the prayer that we might awaken that heart of unconditional loving to embrace the life within and around us, that all beings everywhere might recognize their very essence as loving presence, and to live from that. May there be peace, healing, and freedom for all living beings everywhere. Namaste. Thank you.